Hey guys, it's Jen. Welcome back to Joyful Living. Today we're going to be talking about autoimmune disease and self-care during extremely challenging times, and I'm really glad that you're here. I've been wanting to do this video for over a year. A while ago, I did an update about my Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and the response to that video has been overwhelming. It's one of my most watched videos to date, and I filmed it when I was having actually a really bad day. I was in the middle of a flare-up. I wasn't feeling well. I didn't look good. It was super vulnerable for me, but the responses from that video, and mostly the things that people reached out and told me about their own autoimmune disease, really touched me in a way that is hard for me to describe, because I did not realize how many of us are out there struggling, whether it be with Hashimoto's or with some other autoimmune disease. And it really is a silent situation. We look fine for the most part. We act fine, because when we're not fine, we kind of don't show you our face. We don't go out in public. We hide away from the world. And that video really showed what a bad day looks like. The thing that really stuck out to me was how many of you reached out and said, this was so helpful for me to show to my mom, my sister, my coworkers, my best friend, my spouse, so that they could really understand what it feels like when you're having a bad day. Now, of course, you're going to hear me say a huge disclaimer right now. I am not a medical doctor. I am not a nutritionist. I am not an endocrinologist. I am none of those things. I am just a person who happens to have an autoimmune condition. The other thing about autoimmune disease is there is a huge spectrum. My disease is very, very mild. There are those that are on full-time disability who have the autoimmune disease that I have, or an autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus that can have life-threatening implications. If you have not been diagnosed, or if you don't have a good supportive doctor, that has to be step one. Before we can talk about self-care, before we can talk about lifestyle, before we can talk about diet, you need a good medical professional that is in your corner and is going to take great care of you, and that can be hard to find. I happen to have a fantastic doctor. She is not an endocrinologist. She's actually a general practitioner, but she has really walked me through this journey. And what's been interesting is, as I've gone into perimenopause and some hormonal issues, some changes in my stress levels, my Hashimoto's has caused my thyroid to kind of be all over the map. And I went through a period of time, and actually that was when I filmed that initial video, where it was very, what they would call brittle. It was just up and down. We could not stabilize my thyroid. Thankfully, we have moved through that. And at the moment, while I'm filming this, I am not on any thyroid medication at all, which is crazy to me, because that hasn't happened in well over a decade. Now, that is always subject to change, because anyone who suffers from Hashimoto's can tell you it is not a stable thing. That's kind of what thyroiditis is. You can have underactive thyroid, then you can move into overactive thyroid, then you can go back the other way, and definitely hormones affect that in a major way. So when you add the fact that I'm perimenopausal into that whole mix, it's kind of medically a big old mess. But that's not even what I want to talk about today. I mean, I could talk about that all day, because I have theories about why my thyroid now doesn't need treatment, and it did before, and it may again, and all of those things. But what I want to talk about today, specifically as we get into the winter months, is having a game plan for self-care. And I don't even really like the word self-care, because it does feel a little bit indulgent. I'm going to put an article down in the description box that Sean Patrick Judge, one of my viewers, sent to me today, which was so timely, talking about this theory of self-care and how we used to think self-care meant, you know, going to the spa or going shopping or lunch with friends. But really, it's a health management issue, especially if you have an autoimmune disease. And I cannot get away with some of the things that someone who doesn't have autoimmune disease might be able to, such as having a poor diet, not managing my stress, not exercising, not getting enough sleep. And even when I engage in this radical, extreme self-care health management, that doesn't mean that I am not going to get a flare-up. And as a person who always needs to get an A+ on every paper, I feel it's just like so important for me to hear. Jen, you could do everything right. You could eat impeccably, manage your stress impeccably, get all of the exercise, take the vitamins, do all of the things, and I might still have a flare-up. So if you're watching this today, especially if you are in the middle of a flare-up with your autoimmune disease, this is a no shame zone. We only can control what we can control. And the things I'm going to talk about today are the things that are within my control, and they definitely help, but in no way, shape, or form do they guarantee that I'm not going to have a flare-up. That's just part of the fun. Those are things that I can't control. But because especially now, during a global pandemic and everything else that's going on in the world, it's extremely important to me personally that the things I can control, that I have a solid plan. So let's get practical. Let's talk about the different areas of my life. And I'm going to talk a lot in the first person, not because I'm being self-centered, although I can definitely tend to be that way. I do have a YouTube channel after all, but mostly because I don't want you to think that I'm saying this is necessarily what's right for you. I'm going to talk about the reminders that I need in order to take great care of myself. Okay, so the number one thing that we're going to talk about moving into the holidays that I have to watch is my diet. I am 100% a stress eater. And when you add the fact of what's going on in the world, politically, socioeconomically, health-wise, I really want a lot of simple carbs to bring myself comfort. And although those simple carbs and sugars and alcohol may make me happy in the moment, they do not help me in the long term with the management of my autoimmune disease. And when I eat a lot of, in particular, processed sugar and simple carbs, I have flare-ups. There's no doubt in my mind. I've had this disease for a long time now. I know that this is how this works. So I have to have a food plan. And it does not mean that, especially, we've got Halloween coming up and then Thanksgiving and then Christmas. It doesn't mean that I can't be self-indulgent and have treats. It means I really have to limit that. So what I do is I tell myself I can have one sort of indulgence a day. And again, this isn't about being good or bad or good foods or bad foods. This is all about helping myself manage my own medical condition. So if I have just one treat a day, I usually do okay. Here's what I can't do. I can't have Mickey waffles with our new waffle maker for breakfast and then have, frozen yogurt from the yogurt place at lunch and then have a bowl of ice cream and a glass of wine at dinner. That is way too much sugar, and my body does not do well with a lot of sugar. And I will say that most people with autoimmune disease find that sugar does not help them. What I can do, however, is make choices. So if we're maybe getting takeout from a nice place, because we're still not eating indoor in restaurants, and I want to have a glass of wine with my meal, that will kind of be my one sugar serving for that day. Because remember, alcohol is also metabolizes in your body just like sugar. So does white bread, so does actual sugar. And then, for example, if I want to bake cookies, and I make like the best sugar cookies in the world. I'm just going to tell y'all right now, like I bought a microphone that is remote so that I can do baking videos with you guys this winter because my sugar cookies are the bomb diggity. I digress. Now I want a sugar cookie. But if I have a baking day going on, yes, I'm probably going to eat a couple of sugar cookies, but I'm not going to have, French bread with my spaghetti for dinner that night. So it's all about choices. It's not about deprivation. But I do have to be intentional, and I have to be very careful with what I put into my body because I firmly believe that food is medicine. The second area where I have to be really, really careful is managing my stress. And people have been telling me this for years. Doctors have told me this, friends have told me this, my counselor has told me this, but I always kind of want to ask, okay, what do you mean by that? So I can tell you some things that have helped me manage my stress. I limit my exposure to the news, and that's a tough one because I am very interested in what's going on in the world. I want to be aware. I want to make sure I'm an educated voter. By the way, this is going up right before Election Day, so please make sure you get out and vote. I think it's incredibly important that we are civically aware of the world that's going on around us. However, when I expose myself to too much news, it is too much heartache, it is too much ill will, it's too much just anger and vitriol and all of those things, and it is not good for my immune system. So I try to limit that to no more than kind of one news session a day, and I really try to read my news as opposed to watching my news, because I'm very impressionable, and I find if I can read something in a newspaper or online, that has far less of an effect on me emotionally than if I watch it in the news. So that's something that has really helped me. Another thing is really with family relationships. Remember that not every problem is yours to solve. You do not need to walk into every single conflict, whether that be with your immediate family, or maybe it's your mom or your brother or your sister or your grandparents or whomever. You can walk away from an argument or a disagreement and just set that boundary. There is nothing in the world wrong with that. And if there's a lot of conflict there, it may be really important for your self-care to set some very clear boundaries. That does not make you a bad daughter or son or granddaughter or whatever the case may be. It does make you smart, and it enables you to engage in the world on your own terms, which for me makes a huge difference in my personal stress levels. Another way you can manage stress is if you need professional counseling, make sure you avail yourself of that. I happen to credit part of the healing process with my autoimmune disease with some very intense therapy I received over some abuse that I had as a teenager. And I won't go into all of that, but I did find that my flare-ups and my thyroid levels and all of those things really started to improve once I was in the healing process for that. I do have PTSD. I still am being treated for PTSD, but the fact that I finally was dealing with some things from my past definitely helped mitigate my emotional stress, and I really do give that credit for helping my symptoms be much more manageable. Okay, the third thing that it goes in my self-care plan is exercise. You guys have heard me talk about this a lot, and kind of in tandem with exercise is getting outside every single day. Now, when I say exercise, for me, that does not mean I need to be going to Orange Theory or training for a marathon. It just means daily, consistent movement. Some days it's ballet. Almost every day it is a walk outside. It may be a run some days. It may be yoga some days. But moving my body every single day in some way that is intentional and that is centering is a lifeline. Like if I don't have that, if I don't do that, I see major issues with my autoimmune disease and just with how I feel overall. So I have to have a plan. I have it in my planner. It is on my little habit tracker in my plum paper planner that I have to move my body each and every day. And what I find is if I don't do it first thing, it doesn't happen. And so I really have to make sure that I make it a priority because it is part of my overall health management. All right, the fourth thing that I really have to control is my sleep. Now, sleep for me right now is a bit of a challenge. Again, I am in perimenopause. There's some hormonal issues. I'm in estrogen dominance, which makes you, a little wired, and sleep can be an issue. One of the things I've been blessed to be able to do because I work for myself is I don't schedule anything first thing in the morning if I can at all avoid it, because that way, if for some reason I had a really rough night's sleep, I don't have an alarm going off. A lot of you are not in that situation. You have young children or you have a job that you have to get up and go to early in the morning. So the thing that I would say to you is to make sure you have a really clean bedtime routine. Try to make sure that you're doing the same things every night. You guys know I'm a huge proponent of chamomile tea. I think chamomile tea has changed my life. And when that tea kettle goes off, there's something in my brain that knows we're winding down. It's time for rest. It's time for sleep. And I have this whole routine that I embark upon that takes me about an hour, and I kind of get made fun of in my family because there's no negotiating with my routine. It starts around 8:45 every night. I have my evening tea. I have conversations with my family. I shower in the evenings, I get ready for bed, and then I make sure that my bedroom is a safe, clean, and peaceful space. In fact, I just cleaned out my bedside table. I make sure that I vacuum really well in there during my weekly cleaning. I make sure there's no clothes everywhere. I don't have my computer in my bedroom. And all of these things so that when I begin my sleep routine, it feels clean and peaceful and I'm set up for success. Does that mean I'm going to have a great night's sleep? No. I don't know if I'm going to have a great night's sleep. I hope that I will, but hormones are a funny thing. But again, I'm doing everything I can to set myself up for success. Another thing for me is I don't look at my phone in the evenings. I try to have several different books depending on the mood I'm in or magazines, and I will read for at least 30 minutes before I go to bed, and that really helps settle down my mind, settle down my emotions, and gives me my best shot at getting a good restorative night's sleep. So sleep is super important. And then lastly, as we're moving into the winter months, and it's kind of funny because as I'm talking, there's clouds moving in and out, which is a good reminder to come to this point. Light. And this is going to sound so silly, but I am definitely affected by seasonal affective disorder. And I think a lot of people with autoimmune disease probably are. When it starts getting dark really early, I need light. And although what I'm going to say next is not great for the environment, #sorry environment, around 4 o'clock at night, I go through and I turn on every light in whatever floor of my house I'm going to be on, which is usually that time of day is usually the main floor. Every light in every room goes on. And I know it sounds silly and I know it's terrible from an energy perspective, but I started doing this last year and it made a huge difference because what happened before I would do that is I would be in the midst of doing something and all of a sudden I would turn around and my house was just dark. And it kind of felt just like a Death Eater, like it sucked all the life out of the room. It robbed me of my energy and I just wanted to curl up in a ball. That's not good. But at 4 o'clock, I actually have an alarm set on my phone. And at 4 o'clock, I go around and I turn on all the lights on the main floor. And something about continuing to have that light. I know some people have sun lamps. You can do different things to make sure that you keep that sunlight going. But it really helps my mental clarity to have more light in the evenings. And then of course, when I start my bedtime routine, those lights can slowly and surely be going out. But there may be more that you can affect than you think with your actual environment and where you are in your home. So those are 5 things. And I realize you may have heard them all before. I've heard them all before, but that doesn't mean that every year around this time, I don't have to go down that checklist, reevaluate, make sure that I have all of my systems set up. And I want to say, don't feel guilty or like this is selfish, because really for anyone, but especially if you have an autoimmune disease, this is essential for your health, for how you feel. You wouldn't say that it was selfish if you needed, to go get a refill of a medication or go to the doctor for some chronic illness. And yet with this, we tend to look at it as a luxury to engage in self-care. But that is what is necessary in order for you to feel the best that you can. Again, might I still have a flare-up this winter? Absolutely. It tends to be a very challenging time for me with managing my autoimmune disease, but by taking stock and going through those areas of my life and doing everything within my power to keep myself from having a flare-up, I at least am controlling what I can. I hope today has been helpful. Again, if this is a bad flare-up day for you as you're watching this, I see you. Hang in there. Go watch that other video that I did if you want to see what I look like on a bad day. If this is a good day for you today, don't get lulled into thinking that a bad day can't come. Make sure you're taking extra good care of yourself, and whatever you're doing, I hope you're finding joy. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.